Hello, dear hearts. How are you? How has the post-ecliptic season developmental energy been functioning in your reality? The changes continue, there's no doubt there, because the axis of certain planets and their positionings in this end of month still talk to the most recent eclipse that took place. So energetically there is a lot of forceful development, and as I've mentioned in the recent videos regarding eclipse seasons for 2025 and generally the collective message as we move into the future in the years ahead of us, because there are so many concentrated years of very specific ecliptic portals. So we have a lot to prepare for and work with strengthening our own commitments, specifically those that are about why we're here. So the full moon in Scorpio, which is going to be taking place on the 12th of May 2025 between the hours of 7 and 8 p.m. when we look at the peak, and we're referencing this to Athens, Greece time. But do check out where that peaks in your own time zone. Also note that the 11th of May, 12th of May, and 13th of May will be a very ongoing Scorpionic themed talk in terms of what you'll be respecting and seeing happen in your own reality, because the Black Moon Lilith at her early degrees touches the moon as it enters Scorpio at the 5-degree point and also at the 0-degree point, and then again at the 10-degree point. So Lilith is definitely activated with this full moon. Uranus is also in opposition, which is wonderful. Uranus and Taurus. Uranus preparing to end a very long 7-year journey in Taurus, which talks to me about why this full moon in Scorpio is so important. So you can all look in your own star maps where you have Scorpio and Taurus in your own star maps, also specifically in what house, so you can understand a bit about the teachings that are being personalized for you with such a lunation, with such a full moon, and all of what's taking place with it. Full moons are a peak of a lunar cycle. They're a completion of a lunar cycle. It's the totality of what the moon needs to do month in and month out, and how it, on a very subtle and also gross level, impacts the whole nature, all of us, always, in reference to also the way the solar energy is linked to that lunar energy and the other outer planets and closer planets and the universe, and how that, I guess, upper realm, which is above us, impacts what is here below our realm of the earth. So we are united very strongly when full moons happen because of the peak, the completion phase of the climax of the energy of the moon being in its full illumination. And that does impact the whole. It impacts the tides, it impacts the water levels in our body. The ancients have said this. It also impacts the state of our minds, naturally, because there is a climax taking place in terms of concentrated energy. So it's a more obvious experience when the moon is full. You can see what is happening to you personally. You can see it because it's being illuminated, and the moon works with the inner energies. If we look at the sacred feminine and masculine energies within our body and within our being, the full moon energy and lunar energy is definitely related to the sacred feminine. So this is based on, of course, the Western astrological system, this information. And I just want you to, take a moment to understand that if we're going towards a full moon and it's in Scorpio, and there are such strong oppositions, and the atmosphere is as raw as it is, then there's always going to be a sense of adrenaline, heightened peaks in our energy levels, also low peaks where we feel that we don't have the strength we need to go on. But as these extremes happen, Scorpio ruling extremes, there's no other sign that is more extreme driven than Scorpio. You need to just also find that, I guess, storehouse within you that can work with the tides as they, I guess, present themselves to you in ways that aren't exactly balanced, because anyone who's not familiar with scorpionic energy in such an illuminated point with the full moon won't exactly, I guess, appreciate how the expressing and declarations and movements of the push-pull of what this illuminated peak of this full moon does is all about. I think for those that are familiar with it, who have a lot of Scorpio in their star maps, who are aware of what the energy can do to us personally, who've worked with the energy, then because it's familiar, you'll be able to let it happen without being too astonished, okay? The point here is, though, with the Black Moon Lilith, as I said earlier, coupled with Uranus doing what they're doing with this full moon, Lilithian energy should be quite active this entire year, because she's exalted in Scorpio. So the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio now at the early degrees is exalted, therefore in so much power as she's back on her throne. And it does support the individual and the collective, and it does empower the individual and the collective. However, it only offers such results and rewards to those who are capable and ready to do the hard yards of, excavation within our being, working with people and circumstances in quite a provocative way, because scorpionic energy doesn't leave any stone unturned. It also cannot give in to superficial levels of reality. So it is working with the deepest points, and again, I highlight when it's exalted. If we're working with the collective and this full moon in ways that we need to understand also the degenerate points, unfortunately, Scorpio energy, out of all the 12 star signs, is of the most degenerate when degenerate. Yes? And the exact same time, the other side of the coin, it's the most exalted when exalted. So in terms of capacity, you can understand the low points it can arrive to in terms of the worst and the lowest points and the darkest points versus the most exalted, which is the most supreme degrees of a result. And many would argue and say, why would that be possible? Because there is, 12 star signs that all equally share their degenerate points, intermediate degrees of, an average level of expression, and then a very supreme exalted expression. So how can we single out scorpionic energy as being of the supremest when exalted and of the lowest when degenerate? Well, the answer is, for those that have argued, it's because of the extreme. It's because of being at the two farthest ends of the spectrum. And therefore, you can't arrive to those points if you're not in that capacity of that particular vibration of that star sign. It's just not possible. So a general overall constantly, just to give you an example, exalted frequency is Leo, that you could say has a balanced overall exalted placement in the heavens in terms of a star sign. But that's in a general constant sense. It doesn't fall within the category of a certain extreme at the level that scorpionic energy would when it is exalted. The same goes for another very well placed, prominent figure in our skies, Taurus, is the cosmic bull. Also has a perpetual stability and rhythm to it that doesn't fail and could be seen as being constantly rewarded by a certain pace. But once again, when Scorpio sits on the head of that bull in an opposition, it's always at the peak. It always arrives to the place beyond because, again, the extremes are the furthest possible ends. If we're looking at the end of our galaxy, you could see a scorpionic energy there. Also at the very beginning. So I hope that answers your questions. And therefore, it makes it really difficult for people to work with the energy. A lot of people who are born under the Scorpio sun signs or have a lot of Scorpio in their star maps. For example, I know someone who has around quite firmly 7 placements in Scorpio in their star map. And then if we add some of the aspects, you could say there's so much more. Now, if they're working with that scorpionic energy in a conscious sense, it's very difficult to tell. But what I've noticed from many characters that have come into the story of my own experience, who have a lot of Scorpio, it's not something you can just see in you and relate to and develop and understand, because it's a very difficult frequency to harness. So the same would go for a full moon like this. We can't expect to be able to harness it, but we do need to understand the implications and what's taking place with Uranus there and the Black Moon Lilith. And therefore I will continue on a bit about Scorpio so we can, I guess, be ready for what this means, because it's not a surface level moment, and it's definitely not communicating with us at a surface level. Therefore, speaking and articulating words and communicating about it is very, very difficult. But we do our best. Yes, so those who have concentrated, Scorpio, stelliums and so on in their star maps that I've met in my life, that I know, all sorts of characters that have a lot of Scorpio, incredible beings. I have to say, it's spectacular and also intriguing, because it's very difficult for that energy to be seen as there and active and then worked with. And the more concentrated, the harder it is. So when you get a hold of it eventually, or understand it, or realize that it's there, it can be of the most shocking, because a lot of what Scorpio can do before it provides the clarity, and such a raw sincerity and integrity, is actually create a lot of, maybe you could say, facades, wherein you wouldn't call it an act, but you would definitely say layers wherein it's impossible to arrive to the actual authenticity of the vibration without going through all sorts of tests and trials. And generally, a lot of scorpionic infused entities that I know, one could go their whole life even without going to those points, because it's also a very private frequency. It doesn't like to be exposed or seen or heard. And in personal experience, having so much Scorpio in my own star map, I think it is the governing force in my star map. Doing this type of work, as you can understand, being my destiny, definitely, and my life's work and what I'm supposed to do, for someone with that much Scorpio, going and being public with information and sharing and expressing and talking about things like this, it doesn't exactly go with the scorpionic, agenda, because privacy, being hidden away, secrecy, and so much strictness and rules about what gets said and what doesn't as well is part of, again, what Scorpionic infused star maps are all about. And they're also quite, again, extreme, exclusive. So, if you're talking to a group of people or to everybody versus talking to someone personally, I guess the impact is completely different, because we all know Scorpionic energy works very well one-on-one, and it has a totality there. So whoever's receiving that, if they're interested in the potency of what it can offer, if you're interested in the intimacy of what, for example, such a full moon can offer, there needs to be a receptivity to being completely devoured by the frequency, the energy, which means that it brings you to a nothing. And a lot of people, they don't want that. They don't want to be in total union with something, or in total surrendering to something. And I can completely respect that. And now, if we're talking about the full moon and wanting the energy of the full moon to do what it needs to do, that's a separate subject. But in dynamics, where you're building bonds or relationships, it's not easy to do that, to surrender, because of many issues, such as, who am I surrendering to, for example, and where will they take me, and what are my intentions and motivations about that, and who is it exactly, and so on and so forth. So, a lot of it's got to do with, not giving one's power away when working with Scorpio energy, being very aware of how one's power is used, if it's misused, being aware of the repercussions. But, when we are giving into circumstances, giving into a certain vibration that comes from such an angle, which is very Scorpionic, if it's in the sincere hands, if it's in, hands that will definitely not lead you astray and have your utmost benefit at mind, it's a very rewarding exchange. The beauty of Scorpionic energy is it can be very devotional and very, very selfless, but it will never expose that to the masses or to the collective or to, groups of people. That will only be given to, the person or the circumstance or the passion or the direction that they feel that pulse of devotion towards. And no one will ever be able to enter that or arrive to what that means. Because Scorpionic energy, as I said, is of the most private, exclusive, hidden away, mysterious, and extreme. So why all of this introduction to understand this full moon? Because you will be educated about these parts in your own being through this full moon. You will also be taught quite directly about where you have probably wronged yourself in not letting certain circumstances devour you, so that you arrive to nothing in you and therefore regenerate and come back fully blossomed. It's difficult to do that, as I've said, because we all hold a lot of, self importance that can really blind when and where we need to kind of surrender in life. But, this full moon with Lilith there and Uranus at opposition, it will force a lot of situations and circumstances to surrender. It will give a lot of emphasis on where surrendering needs to take place. And I think when we talk about the power play of Scorpionic energy, which is again of the most powerful, let's not deny that, in a way that's very different to the powers of all the other star signs, because every star sign has its power, has its fall, but the powers of Scorpionic energy, because of their exalted points, which literally translate to awakening. I mean, that's what the exalted point is. It's illumination. It's going beyond everything cyclic, basically overcoming death. And it's not an easy thing to talk about, but that particular exalted point proclaims a fearlessness around what needs to end and begin and end and begin, end and begin, and also be sustained in amidst the cycle. Now, when there's an understanding of that, not intellectually, experientially, then there's also an understanding of how to work with every given time, moment, experience, and how to surrender to that. So, yes, the power struggles of this earth at this current time, and people who are in power at this current time, and are also wanting more power, and so on and so forth. The beauty of the Black Moon Lilith being with this full moon and Uranus, actually leaders who really should be in power will be seen, and suddenly and in abrupt ways. Also, where people have failed to bow their heads to the authorities that have actually been of supreme power and supportful, fully bloomed help to people that have somehow not understood where help's come from, or have evaded from facing where help has come from, they will be made to also bow down, and this is extreme, but that's Scorpio. We have to understand the dimension of equality and everything in harmony and everything balanced does come with a ruler of a certain zodiac sign that has a domain, which is that territory of what we've just discussed. But when we're in the territory of Scorpio, it's not at all about equality and harmony and everything, flowing in symphony, and some kind of a mathematical perfection. When we're dealing with the Scorpionic energy, it's extreme, as I've said on several accounts, and there is also a power play. There are rulers, there are bosses, there are people that have more power, there are people with less power. So there is this, I guess the right way to put it is, well, dualism is very functioning in the realm of Scorpionic energy, yes. But even in the exalted dimension, there are greater powers and discipliners and forces at play that you just cannot not be humbled by, being in their presence. And these types of forces in one's own personal life and in a collective situation will be seen. And it's interesting because the power play also is very active on a vivid external level. So there are many outer leaders and so on out there who are fighting for power, but there will be glimpses of who actually is really fully blossomed and kind of deserves our respect. It will be seen. We will feel we have to bow down to some key figures in our personal lives and in the collective situation, because this full moon will bring through Lilith's wrath and the whip that she holds when in such perfect enthronement currently all this year. She just won't let everyone who didn't understand or didn't see where the help has been coming from, I guess, ignore that or, misplace that truth. Because there is hierarchy in the extreme of this Scorpionic energy, and there is a tower of supreme support. So the humbling will be very wrathful. The humbling will be very confrontational, and also it will work in our physical form. It will work in the pain in our body. It will work through our health. It will work through so many degrees of our being, and it's it's also useful to see this all as a very beautiful mirror of having the chance to be actually quite real. You're no longer trying to be something you're not, or trying in areas of your life to overdo or overextend. You're getting the chance to see what in you and what externally needs to be respected, and who out there is worth our humbling, and where we've been mediocre in just how much we could actually extend and do. That's where the whip will really come for us, because there's no, I guess, seat or sofa or corner where a self-serving oriented mindset with such an astrological placement and energy right now can sit comfortably. It's about not being mediocre. Sometimes we have to overextend. Sometimes we have to go to extremes. Sometimes we have to be very extreme in order to resolve issues. And this is where we are being tested and provoked and challenged. It is one of the most difficult full moons, I won't lie to you. But it will be working in ways that just don't arrive to the conscious mind. You can understand with an Aries full moon, everything is very visible. It's very out there. It's very conscious. It's very in your face, right? But with a Scorpio full moon, it's working on all the parts of your being that you're rarely in conversation with. And on a public stage, it's bringing to light who the real leaders are and who we should bow down to. And in many ways, bringing also newfound important leaders to light, who will be, again, really important. And they will be very powerful. And it's not going to be easy for those who want equality and want everything to be, in some form of equipoise where we're all equal, we're all deserving of the same rights, and so on and so forth. It won't be easy for this mindset moving forward. And I can understand why. But, a lunation like this and a full moon like this is talking about the exact opposite. It's saying, well, there are people that have more power and capacity, and those who don't have that have to accept that they don't, and have to bow down and have to respect where they're at in the, universal or global or domestic situation, and it's quite provocative because, for healing to happen at the root level, this is where this full moon is very useful. You cannot, I guess, lie, right? Because the root is the root. So how to heal at the root level whilst also being ready not to lie or deceive or evade from what that root is. Therefore, there's so much coming at us and also on the collective platform simultaneously. So, I personally, I'm a very big fan of the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. I'm a very big fan of Uranus as a planet, Uranus, and what Uranus can do influentially and symbolically in the last degrees of Taurus in opposition with this full moon is offer that exalted part, that peak, which is that awakening, that illumination. But as that strikes, and as we aim while that strikes for the exalted Scorpio, the highest part of Scorpio, you have to understand the lowest part of Scorpio is of the lowest. So imagine in this world, people who have been at that lowest degree of Scorpio acting it out. Doesn't matter if they have Scorpio in their chart or not. I just mean influentially. They've been doing real scum, low-level stuff, right? Imagine all that boiling somehow in a public arena. And you just can't evade from that anymore. You can't hide from that anymore. Those who have been doing certain things at that level. this is where that tail of scorpionic energy does strike. It strikes in an attempt to maybe resurrect, I think the right word is, the root. Yeah? And then the root can explain the why there's been that low level behavior and conduct and so on. The why there's been so much taking place, where you just cannot get lower than that in terms of the degree of damage and harm and negativity that has been functioning at the most lowest point. The Scorpio tail will strike, so that can be seen. The root of why that has been happening can be visible, and then healing can happen. But when that's visible, that's where public arena has to be ready, because we cannot close our eyes. And we also, on a personal level, if that's taking place personally, we also have to be witnessing the root and confessing at that moment our faults, and confessing is an honest act. It has nothing to do with our faith. It's about seeing it and being, sincere and confessing. And then you have a lot of potential there. What can you do to somehow resolve the real issue, whatever that is for you personally? And of course, collectively, we'll be all answering this question. So, as cryptic as it sounds and as difficult to decipher as it sounds, what I've been expressing, it's the only way it can be told, because, the other side to all this is those who have been abused, used, misused, hurt. I mean, a lot of people who have been put in the wrong position, have been put in the wrong place of power, who have, offered their thrones for many, many years, and gave up their ability to help and support people just because, there were these kind of low, scummy level frequencies that just wanted to, take over and cause havoc and cause harm. The beauty of this year is this can't take place any further. Black Moon Lilith and Scorpio sitting with this full moon and with Uranus there so bravely doing what he does in opposition. It just won't continue. It can't, because those who really can support and help within us, in our environment, in our personal lives, on a collective level, will come up, will rise. They will be seen. Now, who chooses, to be with those ones and understand there is hierarchy, there is, there are people and influences and entities that are greater than we are, and we have to accept that, That's just how it goes. In that process, there will be so much reward. But there's a lot of unlearning involved. It's not easy. It's quite challenging. Yes. So I really do look forward. I look forward to this year. I look forward to this full moon as well. I appreciate the communication of what this full moon has been sharing, the days leading up to it, how it ensures that we're all somehow ready for it. It's not taking us by surprise on the day. It's almost like it's been, happening for weeks before it's been happened, and that's also kind, I would say, because the big news is that a 7-year cycle ends on this full moon, and it does involve Uranus in that cycle. It also involves the teachings of the last 7 full moons in Scorpio, because Scorpio full moons go in 7 in terms of a category. They move in 7. So we've had 2018 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So, this is where it marks the end. And in that, I guess, shadow of all of the full moons leading up to this one in Scorpio, and also Uranus's pattern, which is soon to depart Taurus in opposition to this particular full moon, going into Gemini, you can see the commencement of new beginnings. So that threshold of commencements and endings and commencements is massive with this full moon. So you understand, the full moon in Scorpio in 2018 was an opening. Then we go, from 2018 we go 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, which entered the final message of that 7-year cycle. And now we're departing from that shadow's end, which is this full moon in Scorpio, which is starting, if we're looking at the beginning of a cycle of 7 more years of full moons in Scorpio, which also marks the 7th point. So it's very crucial to also what Uranus is doing. And it sounds all a bit technical, so excuse that, but if you look at your own personal lives from the end of 2017 until now, in that period of close to 8 years, just see how the messages have evolved from each of those full moon and Scorpios until now. Okay? And see the beginning, the opening with Uranus's very strong opposition, striking an awakening, an understanding, a revelation. Like, Eureka, I've understood something from what's been taking place the last 7 years. I've understood something. And preparing yourself for also arriving like a completion point to what you've understood, the teachings of all of this. And then saying, okay, now I'm, ready. Because then we enter the next, 7-year lunar cycle of just the Scorpio teachings, personal teachings. I don't think I know anyone that works with Scorpio full moon cycles in this way that I'm aware of. Yeah, but in my tradition, it's very, very prominent, coming from the kindness of the nomadic lineage. And I think, it's it's quite helpful to be forgiving, strong, and trusting in the instincts that come from the prophecies of your own inner, highest, greatest state and authenticity, your authentic presence, trying your best to believe in what comes to you there. If you can give to as much good deeds and good acts and selfless acts these days and around this full moon, it will be very helpful, especially helping the underprivileged, those who have less than you do. Being interested also in confrontation with death energy, the death and the dying energy in life in general, in all things, being aware of that, contemplating on the fact that will happen to us someday, that is something that's happening all the time, in every direction, and becoming comfortable with that as part of nature's cycles, and through that respecting of the force which is death, it'll naturally help you veer towards things that are more meaningful. So a lot of humbling will happen on this full moon. I find it all quite so useful, But again, very difficult to articulate in words. And we can definitely talk again. But yeah, I think this will be enough for now. So make the most of it and have a good reflection and a good empowerment and a good meditation on death and dying and the value of being alive and how to make the most of your conscious, precious ability to decipher and therefore react and be responsible for what you're doing and who you are at every given moment. And for, of course, the utmost benefit. So thank you so much. Bye.